It is game day on Gamecock Central Radio. Welcome in Emerson Phillips with Wes Mitchell getting ready for South Carolina and Ole Miss. Wes, an interesting matchup today because the Gamecocks have so seldom faced Mississippi. First meeting between the two since 2009, and Ole Miss are struggling right now. They're 5-3 overall. They are 1-3 in the league, but dealing with these NCAA sanctions, Wes, a 2-year bowl ban, and scholarship reductions. And had an interesting talk with Chase Parham from RebelGrove.com, our Rivals Network partner, earlier this week here on GCR. And he said that it's just been a matter of survival for Mississippi. And with their head coach, Matt Luke, he feels like they have survived and they're starting to look to the future.
Yeah, and like you said, it's an interesting matchup. I kind of like it because, you just don't get to see this matchup very often anymore because the way the league is set up and the way the schedules are set up. So, it's always fun to sort of get to see South Carolina play a different team. And it's going to be an intriguing matchup. I think you look at it and you look sort of at how the two teams match up and you say, well, South Carolina has been, at least in the conference, they're decidedly, to me, about middle of the pack as far as an offense goes. And then they're decidedly middle of the pack as far as the defense goes. And then you look at Ole Miss, and they are very, very good offensively, and then probably the worst defense in the conference. So, does that great Ole Miss offense sort of just have its way with South Carolina's defense? Or is South Carolina's defense able to force some field goals, maybe force a turnover or two, and keep that total score down? And then on the other side, is this South Carolina offense against a really bad defense? Are they able just to go up and down the field, or do they shoot themselves in the foot as we've seen them do at times this year? I think it's all, questions of execution. And I think you look at red zone play, and we can probably hit on that a little bit more later on, but I think red zone play is going to be a very, very big key in this game.
Yeah, Ole Miss coming off a bye week, West, so they have gotten a little bit healthier. They've had some injury problems this year, and they do get one of their defensive backs back today that should help them on the back end of their defense, but we don't know how much. And let's face it, Ole Miss needs help, like you talked about. Ole Miss giving up 45 points a game in conference play this year, just a staggering number. But 2 weeks ago, before the bye week, Ole Miss lost to Auburn 31-16, and that was a game that Auburn did a good job defensively in the red zone, like you were talking about. They held Ole Miss to 3 field goals, and they were able to score touchdowns when they got in the red zone. So they won 31-16, and red zone performance was the difference in that game, and it could well be the case again today.
Yeah, and I think you look at this Ole Miss team, and they've put up some really, really big offensive numbers, lesser defenses that they've faced, and then they've been at least held in check against the really, really good defenses that they played. And, you sort of wonder where South Carolina is going to fall on that spectrum. But, like you said, Chase Parham, he's had some interesting stuff for us this week. He was posted on our board as well. And Ole Miss's touchdown percentage in the red zone is in the hundreds, basically, as far as ranks in the country. So, these guys are not scoring touchdowns at a very high percentage. Most of their touchdowns come on big plays. So, I think you look, it's kind of twofold. One, that's sort of been Ole Miss's MO, is that they have not been able to score touchdowns when they get in the red zone, which generally means you're not able to run the football once the field sort of compresses. And then two, South Carolina, we all know, has been a defense under Will Muschamp and Travaris Robinson that has been built on that idea of if we give up yardage in between the 20s, that's fine as long as you can force field goals and force turnovers, although obviously we haven't seen the number of turnovers this year as we saw the previous 2 years. But it's built on that idea of red zone defense, forcing field goals. Then you look at Ole Miss's defense. Chase said similar things about them, that, they have actually been decent in the red zone, but he basically said pretty much every drive from an opponent seems to get into the red zone. Like there's no, there haven't been many 3-and-outs from this Ole Miss defense. So this really, honestly, Emerson, this could be a game where both teams have 500 yards of offense. Both teams could go up and down the field, and the winner is going to be the one that can score touchdowns instead of field goals and not turn the football over.
Ole Miss opened as a 1-point favorite for this noon Eastern kickoff today. It'll be an 11 a.m. local time kick on the SEC network, and the line right now is even. It's a pick'em. And I think it's interesting also, Wes, that the total opened at 65, and that number has shot up to 67. So, folks are expecting what they've seen all year out of Ole Miss, and that's not much defense. And today, from that standpoint, could be a breakout game for the Gamecock offense. And I think that's something that I think fans are hoping to see today, and it could well happen against a Mississippi defense that has struggled. They lost some players to graduation a year ago, and they lost some players to transfer as well when the NCAA sanctions were announced. So they've really had problems on that side of the football. But their offense is scoring a lot of points, Wes, and Muschamp earlier this week talked about how good the Ole Miss offensive line is. Matt Luke, the head coach, a former offensive line coach, and he's done a great job with the Ole Miss group up front.
Yeah, he really has, and I think, you look at their ability to protect their quarterback, who also, I think, gets the football out very quickly, which is another part of that, and they get the football down the field. They have good receivers. They actually have a decent tailback as well, a JUCO transfer kid that has played well. So they spread the football around, and I kind of keep going back to the idea of how many points does South Carolina need to win this game? Is this going to be a game where they can maybe hold Ole Miss into the low 20s, or is this a game where they need to score 30 points? I think especially the way the defense played against Tennessee, which is not a very good offense, and I didn't think the defense played great at all last week. So the way, but Tennessee was able to move the ball pretty well for what Tennessee is offensively. So if you look at that, and not that it always carries over, but you'd probably say this is going to be a game where South Carolina is going to need to put 30 points on the board to feel pretty good about winning the game.
All right, Emerson Phillips with Wes Mitchell here on the Gamecock Central Game Day podcast. We're going to hear today from Collyn Taylor, staff writer with Gamecock Central, and we'll also be joined by Chase Parham from RebelGrove.com. Wes, Chase Parham does a fantastic job. That website is first rate, and I was checking out their Oxford Exxon podcast earlier this week. They've got huge listenership to that podcast because they don't have sports talk radio in Oxford. Oxford's not a big town. They don't have a 107.5 The Game in Oxford, so they get a lot of listeners to their podcast, and the website is really fantastic. Chase does a great job.
Yeah, probably the best podcast on our network, I think.
Yep.
Like you said, they don't have they don't have that local radio, so they did a good job. That's business 101 right there, filling a void in the market there.
That's right.
They've had Matt Luke on their podcast, as a guest. I saw in the preseason. So I think when you got the head coach joining your podcast, that's a pretty good sign of what you got going on there. But yeah, they do a fantastic job, and I'm sure it hasn't been easy with everything that program has gone through. But good fan base there, good website, and it is kind of interesting. I feel like because of the, like we're talking about in the Open, because of this schedule, you kind of almost lose touch of what's going on with some of these other programs. I mean, once I saw Ole Miss was on the schedule, you kind of are going back in your mind. You're like, wait a second, how long has it been since South Carolina played Ole Miss? And this has actually been a really good, I won't say rivalry, but it's been a good series as far as the games go. I was looking at the notes. The last 13 games, 12 of them have been decided by a touchdown or less. So these have been close football games. You look 2009, that game will always be remembered the last time they played as the birth of Sandstorm. That was the Sandstorm game.
That's right.
That South Carolina beat Ole Miss, there at home, and when Ole Miss was, I think, number 4 in the country. They were a very, very good football team. And then I remember the year before South Carolina going to Ole Miss, and I believe was probably an underdog in that game, and Chris Snelly probably having the absolute game of his life, and throwing a bunch of touchdown passes. I remember Jason Barnes having a big touchdown catch there, and South Carolina winning the game, I think, by a touchdown, put up a bunch of points in that game, maybe 35-28 or something. But this has been, when the teams have played over the years, it's been some pretty good games. But obviously, none of these players that are involved in this game have any familiarity with the other. None of these guys are remotely connected, haven't played each other. I guess the only real connection off the field sort of is that Dan Warner, South Carolina's quarterbacks coach, has been an OC at Ole Miss for 2 different stints. So it is a bit of a homecoming for him.
Yeah, Ole Miss knows Warner quite well. Dan Warner obviously knows Ole Miss quite well. So that is the one common thread between these two teams. Wes, you talked about the fact that the Gamecocks and Rebels just haven't played very often, playing last in 2008 and 2009, both Gamecock victories. These two teams will not meet again until 2025.
Yeah, and so it's kind of weird, man. And I wish there was a way that it could be different, because I think the fan base probably likes playing different teams, and you like an opportunity to go to a different place. And it seems, honestly, man, I'll be curious to see how much Garnet is in the stands, because from what I've seen online, what I've seen from some of my buddies as well, social media, it seems like a large contingency of South Carolina fans are going to head to Oxford right now, just because it's one thing. South Carolina plays in Athens every other year. They play in Clemson every other year, but how often are you going to get to take this Oxford trip because of the way the scheduling sets up? So I actually think you're probably going to have a big group of Gamecocks there.
Wes, have you ever been to Oxford? Everybody talks about how great the Grove is, and that's a trip that everybody should make, once in their lifetime, at least once.
Yeah, I've been. I actually haven't been for a football game. I covered South Carolina's baseball trip there. Not Holbrook's last season, but the season before that, when South Carolina, one of the super regional years when they started so hot, and I think they swept Ole Miss. That was a really good Ole Miss baseball team. South Carolina went in there and swept them. But I did get to cover that baseball series and got to go around campus. And it is definitely a small college town, but lots of good eats. And the other thing is, you're not far from Memphis. So I noticed a lot of Gamecock fans were using this also as an opportunity to go check out Memphis and see some of what that city has to offer as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Ole Miss has a very strong recruiting presence in Memphis. All right, Wes, the Gamecocks 1-4 against the SEC West under Muschamp. We know how good the West is. South Carolina 5-12 against West Division opponents since 2010, and that's an interesting number, West, 5-12 against the West. That includes the 3 straight 11-win seasons, the golden era of Gamecock football, and Carolina still couldn't really have a lot of success against the West.
Yeah, and the West, no coincidence, the West has been really, really good. For a long time now. And they've faced some really good teams over there. I don't necessarily falls in that category of being a really good football team. I think this is a very winnable game for the Gamecocks. But it's funny. I don't know if anybody that I know or that I've read really has a strong opinion about this game going one way or the other. Vegas certainly doesn't. They're right down the middle on it, I think. And, most of the people I talk to sort of say, hey, this is a winnable game for South Carolina, but also a very losable game for South Carolina, and it's just going to be about how the game plays out. And I think you start to look big picture as far as the season goes. I think we talked last week about the Tennessee game and what it means for the season, and we sort of agreed that puts South Carolina on pace to get bowl eligible. And, I think you look at this game, and it puts South Carolina potentially on pace to get to that 7-win mark during the regular season. And then even, I think if you go into that Florida game next week with some momentum and feeling good about yourself if you're South Carolina, then that certainly helps you feel a bit better about that game. Whereas if you go in sort of not playing well this week, it's probably going to be tough to win in Gainesville, but that's still, I think, a winnable football game. So, this game is huge. All of them are huge at this point as far as the perception and the win total at the end of the year. So, it plays out, but I'm expecting a pretty good football game.
Wes, Ole Miss has got a couple of receivers that could both go in the first round of next year's NFL draft. A.J. Brown is second in the Southeastern Conference in receiving yards per game, and they lost Metcalf for the season earlier this year, and I think Gamecock fans can relate to the pain that Rebel fans are going through here, given that South Carolina lost Debo last year. Metcalf lost for the season, and he could go in the first round too. So even without Metcalf, Ole Miss has continued to score a lot of points, and they're real strong on offense.
Yes, they have, and you certainly hate it for the Metcalf kid, and then A.J. Brown. Man, this guy, if there's many guys better than him, I want to see him because he's built like your thicker, bigger wide receivers that can go up and get the football, but he's also outstanding after the catch. He can run, he can break tackles. He's got vision. They get him the football in a number of different ways, and the guy's just special. He just finds a way to make plays, and they've for all that's happened with Ole Miss, they have found a way to get some big time receiver talents on their campus the last handful of years. I think you look at the Treadwell kid that was there before, Laquan Treadwell. That guy was outstanding. A.J. Brown is outstanding. So they've had some true number one, like elite wide receivers that have come through this program, and then Jordan Tiamu knows how to give them the football, and they're tough to beat, man. I'm curious to see how South Carolina matches up as far as how they scheme this. There was some discussion on our board, which I enjoyed, about the possibility of J.C. Horn, getting his taste of a true first-round, future first-round pick at wide receiver, and how that matchup might go. And, I sort of said, I don't expect anybody to shut down A.J. Brown, but I don't expect J.C. Horn to back down from anybody either. I mean, this freshman has shown so far this season that nothing really seems to faze him or scare him. So that's something I'll be watching for. Does J.C. and A.J. Brown get hooked up one-on-one at any point? South Carolina probably going to have to play a decent amount of zone coverage in this game just to keep guys in front of them. But when you do that, you sort of get RPO'd to death, and this Ole Miss offense is going to run tempo. They're going to RPO you a ton. So I don't know if that's going to work either. I think South Carolina's defense will have to mix and match, I should say, and try to find a way to confuse Ole Miss. Although probably not going to happen often. I think if you have an opportunity to get the football off somebody, if a ball gets tipped in the air, if there's an interception chance, you're going to have to make it if you're South Carolina.
Tiamu will run when the pocket breaks down, Wes. So one of the keys today will be keeping contained, at least to some degree, on him and preventing him from doing damage when the pocket breaks down, because he can't run the football. And Ole Miss is a tempo offense, like you said, and Muschamp this week said that when you face a tempo team, you got to get your cleats in the ground and get ready to play. I thought that was an insightful statement, because if you snooze, you lose against tempo offense, Wes.
Yeah, and they're going to smell blood in the water, so to speak. They're going to sense it when you're struggling to catch your breath. They're going to sense it when you're a bit tired or when you're not getting lined up. And Muschamp always talks about fatigue makes cowards of us all. And I think anybody that's played sports knows that feeling of when you're gassed, basically, and you lazy. You don't quite do everything exactly the way you're supposed to. You don't quite take that extra step because your body is trying to conserve energy. You're trying to get it done, but you're struggling. You're dying. So, I think these tempo offenses take advantage of that little bit of hesitation, that maybe half effort that you get when you're trying to catch your breath. And you can't sub either. If the offense doesn't sub, you can't sub. So once they smell blood in the water, they're gonna go for it. And I think that's why this Ole Miss offense, combined with the talent they have, don't get me wrong, the talent's a big part of it. But you throw in that talent, and then you get an offense. You get a defense gassed, and your offense has got momentum, and it's just very, very tough. So it's easy to see, especially against some of these just completely overmatched defenses that they played. I think they put up 70 points in a game earlier this year, probably without even breaking a sweat. It kind of, honestly, Emerson, reminds me of some of these Missouri offenses, not this year, but prior, how they would just go up and down the field on these overmatched teams because they just wear them out with tempo, and they don't have depth and they don't have the speed to keep up. So, but the sort of positive thing for South Carolina, if you're a South Carolina fan, is that you sort of know that when they have played some of these better defenses, then it hasn't quite worked as well as it does when they just are completely overmatching some of these smaller schools' defenses.
Noon Eastern kickoff today on the SEC network for the Gamecocks and Rebels. Carolina's 4-3 and 3-3 in the league. Ole Miss 5-3 overall, 1-3 in the conference. Wins over Texas Tech, Southern Illinois, Kent State, Louisiana Monroe, and at Arkansas. Losses to some very good teams: Alabama, LSU, and 2 weeks ago 31-16 against Auburn. Auburn scored 3 touchdowns on consecutive drives to open the third quarter and break open what had been a close game up until halftime. So, Wes, Ole Miss 2-8 at home in their last 10 SEC home games. This team has not played well at home, and that's got to be an advantage for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, they haven't, and for the most part, they've struggled as a football team overall, I think, and it's interesting. This game is being played at 11 o'clock, I guess, local time for the guys out there, but I thought that was an interesting discussion this week, Emerson, about the fact that South Carolina practices in the morning. Every single day they practice anyway. So, under Spurrier, South Carolina always practice in the afternoon or at night. And this year's, or ever since Muschamp got in, he really switched that up and changed the way he handled things. And they practice in the morning anyway. So they're used to being up. They're used to being at the stadium early. It may very strangely be a little bit of an advantage for South Carolina. Obviously, they won't be familiar with this stadium or this turf or anything, but for the game time to be so early, I think it actually may strangely play into South Carolina's favor. Yeah,
and you got to wonder, how many Ole Miss fans are going to be excited about this game with the early start, 11 a.m. local time, and it has been a common occurrence this year for the place to empty out in the second half when they've been behind. So, I think this is a good situation for South Carolina, all things considered. So, we're getting ready for South Carolina and Ole Miss here on the Gamecock Central Game Day podcast. Wes, a huge day in the SEC. Before we turn our attention to the Gamecocks, let's take a look at the schedule in the SEC today. Number 20, Texas A&M, is at Auburn. That's a noon kickoff on ESPN. And, Wes, we basically got, both divisions' de facto championship games today. Start with 3:30 CBS game, number 6 Georgia at number 9 Kentucky, and the winner of this will win the SEC East.
I mean, how weird is that sentence you just said? I'll go ahead and say I've got Georgia in this game. Kentucky's a great story. It's been fun, but I think Georgia's the better football team, even with that game being in Kentucky. But hey, good for Kentucky, man. It'll be another great atmosphere there. Quarterback play, though, just not enough to beat up on a team like Georgia. But, yeah, man, that's just does show you never know. You never know when the season starts. We think we got it figured out. But
yep.
Kentucky and Georgia in a de facto championship for the East is not a sentence I expected you'd be saying this year on the Gamecock Central Game Day podcast.
Yep. What a job Mark Stoops has done with Kentucky. But I'm with you. I think Kentucky's just one-dimensional offensively, and Georgia, with its big game experience, is going to win this football game. Georgia's about a 9-point favorite there. 4 o'clock kick today on the SEC Network, Missouri at number 11, Florida. 4 o'clock kick and no TV for Charlotte at Tennessee. 7:30 kick on SEC Network for Louisiana Tech at number 16, Ole Miss. And then the de facto SEC West championship game, West. 8 o'clock kick on CBS for number 1 ranked Alabama at 3rd ranked LSU. LSU's beaten 5 ranked teams this year, Wes.
Yeah, now, LSU's that team that under Ed Orgeron that we know that they're LSU, but I don't know that anybody took them quite as seriously as maybe we should prior to this year. So, going into the season, and they've just found a way to win games. They beat that really good Georgia team, and now Alabama's got to go into LSU at night. Anything seems to happen at that stadium at nighttime when you get the LSU faithful all fired up and liquored up, and it's a very, very special. That's a special atmosphere right now. There, right there, man. Like that is one place I have been to LSU, and wow, that's honestly when South Carolina got the ball back late in that game, when Connor Shaw was still there. Not the last time they played, but the time before that. During the win of 11 11-win seasons. That's the loudest I've ever heard a football stadium. So LSU, I still think Alabama will win this game. They probably pull away, but there's always something special about LSU at night. So,
yep.
So who knows? I think Bama ultimately does take care of business, and I don't really think by the fourth quarter that it's going to be all that close. But I think LSU could at least give Alabama a little bit of a scare.
Baton Rouge, a notoriously difficult place to win, particularly at night, like Wes said. So number 1 Bama and number 3 LSU in Baton Rouge, 8 o'clock tonight on CBS. The whole nation, I'm sure, will be watching for that huge matchup. And Wes, even if Bama doesn't win, they can still win the national championship. Bama does not have to win the West to win the national title. We found that out last year.
Exactly, and I think Alabama has the best team. I mean, I think everybody can see that's the best team in the country right now. And, it's kind of interesting that the precedent is there, like you said, even if they lose this game, that they can still go and make it to the college football playoff. Although there will be some tough decisions this year if the committee is left with that possibility this season when you look at some of the other teams that are out there.
Wes, real quick on the Gamecocks, ground and pound for South Carolina last week in the win over Tennessee. And I was really surprised that the Gamecocks only had to throw 16 passes in that ball game. Carolina ran for 245 yards in the win over the Vols. And I'm curious to know if you think it will be more of the same against the Rebels.
No, I honestly think they're going to have to throw it a bit more than that if they're going to win this week. I think more into the mid-20s as far as passes thrown. I think if Jake Bentley throws about 24 or 25 passes in this game, then that was going to be a good sign for South Carolina. And if sort of depending on how many total plays, obviously that's a factor as well. But if it's about half and half, I think that's sort of the magic recipe there for them. You look at Coastal Carolina, you look at Vanderbilt. That was 2 games where they were able to run the football, but they also got big plays from the passing game. They got some big plays from the passing game last week as well against Tennessee, but it was mainly just take the air out of the ball on first down, run the ball on second down, and then see what you get on third down. And I think that game plan won't necessarily be able to keep up with Ole Miss. They're going to have to run the football, don't get me wrong, because they're going to have to try to keep their defense from getting winded. This isn't a South Carolina defense, so that makes it difficult against, like you talked about, this tempo-based Ole Miss offense. But at the end of the day, South Carolina is going to have to worry about themselves on offense as well. And what I mean by that is, you can't be so scared of Ole Miss's offense that you put yourself at a disadvantage in trying to go score points. So I think they're going to have to be a little more aggressive than they were last week, open it up. Not that you want Jake Bentley to throw the ball around the field 50 times, but when the passing game is there, throw the ball on first down, take some chances down the field. I think against a bad defense, you can afford to throw the ball down the field on first down because you can always come back to the running game on second down and put yourself in a manageable third down situation.
And on defense, Wes, the return of DJ Wanham last week. I said on last week's Game Day podcast, I didn't expect Wanham to have 3 or 4 sacks, but we thought that because he could command the double team, he would open up opportunities for his teammates. Well, he did have 2 sacks, including the one that basically clinched the game late. What a huge play that was. And his return clearly bolstered the Gamecock defense. They looked like a different unit last week, I thought, Wes.
To me, he's the best overall player on that defense. I think you can make the argument. Javon Kellogg really good. I think J.C. Horn is up there as well. But, man, you look at what this kid brings to the table in so many different ways, like we talked about. And then, when the game was on the line, when there was a time for him to go make a play, he just whipped his man. Like there was nothing else. There's nothing else fancy about that.
That's right.
There was a 3-man rush, and it was like Wanham said, "It's time. I'm going to whip my man, and I'm going to end this football game because I'm tired of giving up, third downs and fourth down conversions, and I'm tired of saying time to put them away." And so he helped put them away, and that was the difference in the game.
Yeah, and I thought he opened things up for Kinlaw. Kinlaw had an impact in the game, and the presence of Wanham kind of frees up Javon Kinlaw, and the same for Bryson Allen Williams. So great to see number 8 back healthy again. And Wes, you figure he's only going to get better as the season goes on, as he gets more comfortable being in the game and having come back from that injury. You figure he's only going to get better, so that's a good sign, good news for the Gamecock defense.
Yeah, and he he was asked about that on Tuesday, and I think he sort of said the second half was when he really started to settle in. First half he was sort of feeling his way around a little bit, getting back comfortable out there, but he's such a sharp kid, such a smart kid, and then he was actually able to make history. He and his brother Dylan won him. I think the only two brothers to ever get SEC honors in the same week, with DJ Wanham getting the defensive honors and then Dylan getting freshman honors.
Yeah, that was really cool. So South Carolina ready for Ole Miss today, 11 a.m. local time, noon Eastern kickoff on the SEC Network for South Carolina and Ole Miss. All right, an abbreviated edition of the Gamecock Central Game Day podcast today. Let's get keys to victory from Gamecock Central staff writer Collyn Taylor.
So obviously I think with South Carolina, it starts on defense. Ole Miss is a really potent offense. So if you can slow down Jordan Tiamu and his legs and force him to pass the ball and throw and take away the running game, that's going to help you. Getting a pass rush with 4 in terms of DJ Wanham stepping up, Bryson Ella Williams, Javon Kinlaw, Kier Thomas, those guys, if they can get a pass rush, that's going to be huge for them. And defensively, I think that, or on offense, you really got to, I think you want to throw the ball. You're going to want to control the clock and move the ball methodically down the field. And that has to go with converting third downs. You're going to have to do that and really keep the ball away from this really potent, really good Ole Miss lineup.
Thank you very much, Collyn. That's Collyn Taylor, staff writer with Gamecock Central. And now for Ole Miss's keys to victory, we'll send it to Chase Parham from our Rivals Network partner, RebelGrove.com.
Yeah, Ole Miss in South Carolina this Saturday at 11 a.m. And for Ole Miss, it's all about producing in the red zone. You know that defense is going to give up points. You know South Carolina is probably going to control some tempo. Ole Miss's defense averaging more than 80 plays per game. So for Ole Miss, when it gets the ball, it's got to score touchdowns. It can't score field goals. That's what haunted it against Auburn. It needs 7 points. So how they go about that, how they capitalize scoring opportunities will be a big difference in this game. And then defensively, it's how many different guys they can play in the secondary. Can they build up some depth? Can they interchange those guys? Cedric Woods, a strong safety for Ole Miss, is basically averaging every play. He never comes out of the game. That's going to break you down against the South Carolina team that's going to try to run the football, that's going to go off RPO and play action. So for Ole Miss, can they be fresh? Can they be disciplined? Can they sub out enough guys to not have mental lapses to keep them in this game and force either some turnovers or some stops before South Carolina gets in the red zone? So it's all about red zone and just finding a way to manage that defense for Ole Miss this Saturday against the Gamecocks.
Fantastic. Chase Parham from RebelGrove.com, our Rivals Network partner, does a fantastic job. We invite you to visit that site for all things Ole Miss. It's RebelGrove.com. Wes, interesting matchup today. These two teams don't face each other very often. We don't really know what to expect, but everybody thinks it's going to be a high-scoring game.
Yeah, and I think let me just say what's been said all week long, too. Start fast if you're the Gamecocks. I thought it was funny. Every single other question in the press conference this week seemed to be about what can South Carolina do to start fast? And, I don't think there's a magic formula. Go execute. The plays are there. The guys know it. They've shown they can move the football. So they got to execute from the beginning, because if they do that, they can take control of this football game. If they don't, they could be down 17-0 before they even know it. So, this team has been playing from behind for it feels like the entire season. But certainly the last 4 or 5 weeks they've been playing from behind. And I think they got to avoid that this week. Like you said, man, if you can sort of put a little distance between you and this Ole Miss team early on, the crowd will be out of it. Like you said, the second half, the fan base. We hear about the Grove. Well, the Grove is awfully tempting when you're deciding between sitting in those bleachers down 17 points or hitting up the Grove again in the third quarter,
Yep.
So,
and waiting
I'm not
whistle.
sure I blame them. And apparently the women on the Grove are pretty special too.
Yeah, right.
So, that's a pretty tempting deal there, man. But start fast, red zone, just to sort of recap, and then it always comes down to turnovers too. I know it's cliche, but to me that's the final keys here for the Gamecocks to come back home with a win.
Yeah, the Grove, known for its Division I talent, so if you're headed to the game today, if you're in Oxford, enjoy that and enjoy the contest. And Wes, great report today. We enjoy talking with you as always. Thank you, brother.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one, man.
All right, that's Wes Mitchell, and I'm Emerson Phillips. Thanks for joining us on the Gamecock Central Game Day podcast, and enjoy the ball game, friends.